The boy wasn't aware at that stage that his anus had been torn and he started bleeding. He was screaming in agony on the seat and his knuckles were turning white. And as the priest continued to thrust while he screamed, he said he focused on the St Christopher's cross on the dashboard and watched it swaying back and forward to try and take his focus off the pain.
Tonight, a senior serving police officer alleges the Catholic Church covers up crimes of pedophile priests, silences investigations and destroys crucial evidence to avoid prosecutions. Detective Chief Inspector Peter Fox has spent more than 30 years as an investigator and has been at the centre of major police operations in the Newcastle Hunter area of New South Wales. He's written a letter to the Premier Barry O'Farrell calling for a royal commission. Mirroring police evidence given to the Victorian inquiry, he says in his letter, many police are frustrated by this sinister behaviour, which will continue until someone stops it. Well, coming up in our interview tonight, Peter Fox will reveal much more of what he describes as a network protecting pedophile priests. First, this report by Suzanne Smith.
Detective Chief Inspector Peter Fox spoke at a rally of victims and their families in Newcastle last September.
I've been in the police force 34 years. I'm not a kid that just joined yesterday. I've been involved in investigating the clergy for about 20 of those. There are very good reasons, let me tell you, that we need a royal commission.
To understand the enormity of the abuse in this one small area of New South Wales, you need only to look at the statistics for the Newcastle-Maitland diocese. Newcastle-Maitland has 400 known victims of child sexual abuse by clergy. 11 clergy have been charged and convicted since 1995. 6 Catholic teachers have been convicted, 3 priests on trial at the moment. For the first time ever, a priest was charged with concealing the crimes of another. 12 priests involved in substantial compensation claims, and it had the highest known compensation payout to a victim, the amount of $3 million. And today, 2 police strike forces are investigating whether church officials were involved in covering up crimes. Not all the clergy are fully cooperating with police, but the Premier Barry O'Farrell has repeatedly said the police have the investigation under control.
I'm not interested in a made-for-TV moment announcing a royal commission. I'm interested in getting people to pay the penalty of the abuse of children, the taking from young people their future.
But Peter Fox believes police prosecutions on their own cannot deal with the church structures and systems for reporting abuse.
I don't accept Mr O'Farrell's comment that the police force has it all under control.
Peter Fox was responsible for the conviction of the pedophile priest, Father Jim Fletcher. In 2003, the New South Wales Ombudsman launched an investigation after a victim's mother complained about why Father Fletcher had not been stood down by the church and removed from contact with children during the police investigation. The New South Wales Ombudsman's Office produced a report in 2004 that was highly critical of the Catholic Church's reporting systems. The Catholic Church received a copy of that report, but the victim's mother did not. Peter Fox is calling on the Ombudsman's Office to release that report to the public in the interests of transparency. A spokeswoman for the Ombudsman says the report cannot be released due to privacy provisions in the Act. Peter Fox also encountered alleged serious issues of cover-up in his investigation of Father Dennis McAlinden. The priest had arrived in Australia from Ireland in 1949, and for 4 decades he was transferred from parish to parish, and even outside Australia to New Zealand, Papua New Guinea and the United Kingdom. The New South Wales Department of Public Prosecutions is now looking at whether McAlinden's crimes were covered up by 3 senior members of the clergy, including the General Secretary of the Australian Catholics Bishops' Conference, Brian Lucas, the Archbishop of Adelaide, Philip Wilson, and former Bishop of Newcastle, Michael Malone. Detective Chief Inspector Peter Fox was in the middle of investigating this matter in 2010 when he was directed to hand over all his evidence to other officers, including a statement from a critical witness.
I sat down with that woman, I think, for about 4-hour sessions and typed up a statement. And let me tell you, it's explosive. And the material I put together, and finally when I did contact the police department, I was directed to hand that statement over to other people, to cease my investigations on that matter, and to hand over other documents.
Lateline asked New South Wales Premier Barry O'Farrell for a specific response to Peter Fox's letter to him. His spokesman released this statement.
Police investigations are ongoing and he won't interfere with that. The best result is successful prosecutions and no one should keep these offences secret.
Suzanne Smith, Lateline.
And Detective Chief Inspector Peter Fox joined me in the studio just a short time ago. Detective Chief Inspector Peter Fox, thanks for joining us.
It's a pleasure, Tony.
Let's start with how you got so frustrated and angry that you're publicly challenging the New South Wales Premier. Now, your letter to Premier O'Farrell begins like this: I've investigated so many sexual assaults in 30 years of policing that I've lost count. I've seen the worst society can dredge up, particularly the evil of pedophilia within the Catholic Church. What is the worst of it?
Oh, Tony, I think most people would be absolutely crumpled up in tears to hear it. Just some examples of what I've sat and listened to is that one young boy at the hands of pedophile priest James Fletcher, he was 12 years of age when the priest drove to a secluded park outside of Maitland. He told the boy to remove his pants, and the boy was totally unaware of what was going on and quite embarrassed, but that particular priest anally penetrated him. The boy wasn't aware at that stage that his anus had been torn and he started bleeding. He was screaming in agony on the seat and his knuckles were turning white. And as the priest continued to thrust while he screamed, he said he focused on the St Christopher's cross on the dashboard and watched it swaying back and forward to try and take his focus off the pain. The priest never relented at any stage during that, and even after the act was completed, he was totally uncaring for the child and simply sat back in the driver's seat and had a cigarette while he finished sobbing.
Some of these stories, in fact some of the statements that you've taken from witnesses, victims, so upset a DPP solicitor that she simply couldn't go on with the case. Is that one of these?
That was one of those cases, and again that was a solicitor that had dealt with many cases of sexual abuse, but the details and the graphic images that were conveyed in those statements so upset her, and she was well known to me. She rang me up and apologised profusely but said, I just cannot stay with this case. I just can't handle it.
You wouldn't be surprised by that, would you? Because in fact most people don't want to hear these things. They're too awful for them to even comprehend.
Well, as I said in my letter to the Premier today, you know, we do block a lot of those images away and we just accept the word pedophile or molestation. But when you actually sit down with those victims and you're looking into their eyes, you know, police are not immune from it, and you know, I sat there with so many of those victims, and you can't but help feel their pain. The agony is still there, and it will always be there to some degree. And to just be so cold, even though I'm in a professional role, not to have some empathy for what that individual has gone through as a child, just wouldn't be human.
Some of them you saw in mental institutions. Some committed suicide. You spoke to their relatives. All of them were terribly, terribly damaged. Oh,
absolutely. And you know, one young boy, I actually had my wife drop me off in Maitland, and I went to the psychiatric ward of Maitland Hospital, and I sat with that young fellow for a number of hours, just reassuring him that he didn't have to go on with the matter if he wasn't up to it. You know, we broke for a number of months before he was ready to come back. You know, these aren't easy things, and there's got to be a lot of compassion, a lot of understanding from police. You know, sometimes these people aren't up to going through to taking it to court, and we've got to sometimes take that hard pill and sit back and say, okay, it's frustrating that we won't get this guy, but we can't put them through that ordeal. You know, the degree of courage those that do come back and say, listen, I want to finish that statement, I want to see him taken to court, how we can sit back and say they do not deserve our fullest support, because my God, they've got some courage to be able to stand up and do what they've got to do and say what they've got to say in court and relive that ordeal. Whether you're the Premier of New South Wales or you're just somebody sitting back watching this on TV tonight, it's got to move you. It can't but move you. It's terrible.
As we've heard, the scale of this abuse in Newcastle, Maitland Diocese over many years is truly shocking. It's astonishing, in fact. 400 victims, 14 clergy charged and convicted, 6 Catholic teachers convicted, 3 priests currently on trial. How does this much evil get concentrated in one small area?
I don't think it takes a detective chief inspector to work that out, Tony. Alarm bells were ringing there for me many years ago. So much so that I actually detailed a number of reports to hierarchy within the police department to launch fuller investigations. It was quite evident that something was going on. These priests were operating in adjoining parishes, abusing children. They were meeting at meetings together. In many cases that I came across, one priest who had previously faced pedophile charges was donating parish money to the legal support of another priest to defend him against those charges. I had other priests that hadn't been charged with anything removing evidence and destroying it before we were able to secure it. And we just went around in circles.
This is as horrific as the litany of sexual crimes against children are. To me, one of the most disturbing lines in your letter was along these lines. I can testify from my own experience. The church covers up, silences victims, hinders police investigations, alerts offenders, destroys evidence, and moves priests to protect the good name of the church. You're saying you have evidence of all of this?
Not only do I have evidence, it's irrefutable. Most of that is fact. It's been admitted by many of them. We encounter it all the time. For people to sit back and say it's not going on, they've got their head in the sand. The greatest frustration is that there is so much power and organisation behind the scenes that police don't have the powers to be able to go in and seize documents and have them disclose things to us.
If things were covered up, if there was a serious cover-up, how high up the chain did it go, to your sure knowledge?
I have definite information that of some covering up, certainly to a number of diocese bishops. It potentially goes even higher than that.
Higher than that? You mean into the top levels of the church hierarchy, is that what you're saying?
That's correct. I've got no doubt, to sit back and sort of say, listen, each of these dioceses are self-autonomous and there's no one above that knows what goes on at those lower levels. We live in a real world. It would be as if, I'm doing something in the police force at Raymond Terrace and I'm not accountable to somebody else at a higher level at Newcastle or in Sydney. That's how the chain of command in any organisation works. To turn around and say, no, we work something different, we didn't know about that. I think most of the public are smart enough to be able to put 2 and 2 together there.
Proving it, of course, is the other thing, the critical thing, and it's what you, I guess, in a way, it's what you've been searching for all this time. In 2010, 2 years ago, new witnesses started to come forward to give evidence about the activities of one pedophile priest called Father McAlinden. Now, one of those witnesses I would describe as a key church insider, a whistleblower. You took a statement from this person. How significant was that statement?
When I was directed to hand that statement over, I described her statement, and I'd never used the term about a statement in my entire career before that, but I described that statement as explosive, and I still describe it as explosive. What is disclosed in that is monumental. I spent a couple of months getting that statement, typing it down in very careful detail, and spending an enormous amount of time with that particular witness who was, like many victims, and I should add, Tony, that she wasn't simply a witness. She'd also herself